Hi, this is a video for Xanda, Intarsiapearl, and this is a video response to her vlog where she talks about the issues with her father. So, I will go ahead in case anyone else, comes across this and wants to know what's going on. What I'm going to do is I don't really have any advice to offer. But a lot of times I gain insight into my situation by hearing how people who have been in situations similar to mine have dealt with theirs. So I had what I would call a difficult dad, and he's now passed away. And I thought I would just share with Xanda. Hi, Xanda. How I coped and what my feelings were, and maybe something in that, you can take something out of this for yourself. So essentially, this is a vlog about me and my dad, and I know that you have noticed my cat ears. Basically, I put on my little pajama top thingy and realized I was chilly, so I went and got this lovely, it's a really thick flannel. It actually doesn't have like a wrong side. It has all these cool cats all the way through. It's like, anyhow. I have this jacket, this really comfortable cat jacket, and I sat down and then I realized, oh wow, I'm wearing a cat jacket. I should wear my cat ears too. So the cat ears aren't indicating, like a movie or book spoiler. They're just indicating I like cats and I have a really cool cat jacket. Okay, so Xanda, I really feel you on having paperwork that you need your dad to respond to, and there's probably a time constraint on it, and you're worrying if he will come through for you. I know that when I needed something like that from my dad, I basically had to kick his butt along and remind him because he just was not interested. And I had two very definite stages in my relationship with him. My early childhood relationship and a new relationship that began in the 1980s when his father passed away. And my childhood relationship with him was, it was not one of these bad, terrible, abusive relationships at all. But it was crap because he was the most distant dad that you could possibly be while living in the same house with someone and meeting your obligations. So tremendous amount of kudos to him, because he did, he was a physicist, he loved his job, he had a steady job, so we were not in financial difficulties when I was growing up. With a lot of nagging from my mother, he would go out and mow the lawn once a week. But to be honest with you, he did not like children. They made him uncomfortable. They were too much of a responsibility for him. He did not know how to respond to children. They're hilarious stories. He even used to tell me the story after I became an adult of, when they first got married, he apparently had some elaborate for the late 50s, early 60s stereo system that had all the knobs and dials on it. And when I got old enough to walk around and see the knobs and dials, of course, all I wanted to do was turn them. So he sits down and explains to me very calmly why I was messing up all his settings on the stereo, and why if I turned the knobs too hard I could potentially break them, and all the trouble that could cause. And I looked at him and made I didn't even really have words yet, some incomprehensible sound, drooled slightly, and went back to what I was doing. And he talks about how he was so tremendously frustrated because I just couldn't understand him. It was no different than having a pet, a dog or a cat. And, finally I just had to be physically removed from the stereo. And he saw that as children are frustrating because they're more like little animals than little people. And then he could not wait for me to talk so that he could have reasoned discussions with me. And his next story is about one of those lamps that sits on a pole and has a very long base. And it had 2 light bulbs in it. And I remember this, because it was there for longer than just my very early childhood. And it had 2 little chains you could pull to turn on either one or the other. Well, apparently when I was old enough to speak to a certain extent, I found out that if I rattled this pole, these little chains would swing back and forth and click. And I was rattling it away, and my father came by and explained how it was a very nice lamp, and my great-grandfather, whose hobby was, making furniture, had made this beautiful lamp post, and how it would be so sad if I knocked it over. And, one of the first words children get in their vocabulary is no. So apparently he was quite disappointed because I looked at him and I said, no, and kept on shaking it. And he was really distressed because, again, the only way to stop me was to remove me, and I still wouldn't listen to his reasoned argument. Okay, so this gives you some insight into how he dealt with children. Another funny story I was told by my mother was that the one time she let him babysit me when I was a kid was when I was just learning. I was still in a high chair being fed, but I was at that stage where I wanted to feed myself. So I would grab at the spoon and things with a lot of unsuccessful attempts to get it in my mouth, and it would end up in my hair, on my clothes, on the chair, and on the floor. And my father, when he saw the big mess on everything, picked up the chair with me in it, sat it and me in the shower, and turned on the water to wash us all clean. So my mother came home, about when that was going on, to find me drenched and screeching in the shower, and big clumps of cottage cheese now clogging up the tub drain. So yes, these stories are kind of endearing and funny, but they're not really so funny when you have to live with it. And after I got older, he freely admitted that he did not want children. He wanted a marriage of 2 people who would, whether the wife worked or not, because it was it was more common for wives simply not to work back in the day when I was born. He wanted a woman who would share hobbies with him. Their income would go to things like rock collecting and rock tumbling. He had a rock tumbler and stuff like that, and he did not want the responsibility or the aggravation of children. And when their marriage started to get a little shaky, my mother figured, oh, everybody wants a family. And so that is why I'm sitting here, cat ears and all. And he did step up in the sense that he didn't leave us. My mother would refuse to get up in the morning, so, he would provide breakfast and get us out of bed when we were kids to see us getting off to school. But he managed to do it by sitting there completely silently. He wouldn't speak. And one of my fantasies as a kid was he would always serve me thick purple grape juice, even though it was icky and sticky and I didn't like it. And I used to wonder the whole time, what would happen? What would he do if I were to walk over and dump it on his head? Because he would sit there and eat his breakfast, and then he would say, okay, it's time to leave for school, and that was kind of it. I never did feel a personal dislike from him. It was not like he looked at me and he said, Alice, and you're my sister Addie, you are terrible kids and I don't like you. It was just the absolute stay away from me. You're scabby, you're dirty, and you're fussing, and I just don't want to deal with it. He went to work, he came home, he would spend time laying flat on his back with his feet up because he had a bad back. He would get up and he would read. Then he would watch TV, then he would go to bed. And we could be turning somersaults across the room in front of him, and he didn't respond. He would fall asleep at our school performances, and when one of the teachers enthusiastically asked him when I was in a 7th grade play, so what did you think? He said, well, that was pretty grim. Kids just can't act. I laugh now. I didn't laugh then, okay? And he had to be kicked and goaded into doing anything. Now, interestingly enough, he was a fascinating and likable person. I have my broad taste in music because of him. He listened to everything from Eartha Kitt to music from the medieval period. But because he was not a fatherly type of person, he never sat us down and said, listen to this great music. It was just on in the background, and we absorbed it, kind of through osmosis. Or being kids, we would be, Daddy, Daddy, who's this? Daddy, Daddy, who's that? And he would look, like we were trying to pull his fingernails out, and he would answer us with his great patience, like, all right, blah, 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 now will you shut up and go away? So that was kind of my relationship with him. It wasn't. My sister describes him as a non-entity. And honestly, compared to what, a bad father can be, a non-entity who works regularly, pays the bills, and mows the lawn is not that bad. Although my mother was spiraling down in her mental illness, and he ignored that too, to very detrimental effects. So I went through my childhood beginning to dislike him, actually, when I saw what other dads were like. Other dads actually had an interest in their children. Other dads liked spending time with their children. We could ride for 2.5 hours to visit my grandparents, and he would not say a word to me in the car. Go figure. So, as a child, I actually began to hate him for his failure, complete and total failure as a dad. None of this, I'm so proud of my daughter is so beautiful. Now, he did coax me through math because he was extremely concerned that I might be stupid. But, when I got old enough to look around at other people's dads, and I would see them put their arms around their kids, boys or girls, and share things with them. My dad likes fishing, and my dad took me fishing. The last thing my dad would want to do is take me with him on one of his hobbies. So anyway, that goes on, and I really grow to hate that. I hate not existing in his world. And I really have moved as I went through my teenage years from sort of confusion to active dislike. And that's where it stands. And there is still a part of me that wants to stomp my foot, because no matter how old you get, there is a parent-child relationship. And in the parent-child relationship, my father was, emotionally at least, a failure. And that part of me still sometimes gets angry. When I see how much my brother-in-law loves my nieces and interacts with them, I will sometimes have memories and twinges where I want to say, Dad, you sucked. Okay. His father passed away in the 80s when I was in my 20s, and he had an epiphany. He realized that his father's death meant absolutely nothing to him. He had to take off work to go to the funeral. And he even said it had no more emotion to him than having to take off work to go to the dentist. Except this time, he didn't have to have Novocaine. So if you consider your father's funeral a step above the dentist because you don't have to have Novocaine, that's a pretty crappy relationship. And then he said the more he thought about the total lack of impact his father had in his life, he realized he had 2 children who he would have no impact on either. And at that point, as an adult, we began to get to know each other. He was never a fatherly figure, even at that point. I don't think he had the capability in him to have a parenting relationship. He became more of a goofy, funny, quirky older brother. And he really was. When I had a job, he would say these things like, you've got money, you take me out to dinner. I never had, and he never did volunteer. Daddy's here, Daddy will help you. No, he became much more attuned to what was going on with me, and if, my car engine completely imploded and I needed help, getting another car so I could get to work, if I asked him, yes, he would now step in and help me out. Whereas I'm not entirely sure he would have noticed when I was a kid. But, he's still, so he was like the older brother. Oh, I got to hit my older brother up for some cash. I'm really, in a bind. But he was a funny person. He was a funny person. He had this amazingly dry sense of humor. And it came out at all the oddest times. And he was a likable person. No, he was not a dependable person. He was not a nurturing person. But as I got to know him, I found that he would sympathize. When my cat died and my father said, I'm sorry, I noticed that there were tears in his eyes. Now, he didn't hug me, he didn't offer to do anything, but he did have an empathy. And so I developed, oh God, this is 15 minutes, I'm so sorry. I developed an appreciation of him as a person, not as a dad. And I'm glad that I had that. But that was his doing. That's what I want to stress to you. That was his doing. I rejected him as a father because he was not one. And if he had not approached me when I got older and also become more candid about his failures as a father, at one point I went to church with him, although I didn't normally. You know, when I was maybe in my 30s, I just went to be social. And they were having some program where, you know, the Sunday school classes were going up and singing little songs, and then the service ended, and the Sunday school classes lingered so that the church members could go up and congratulate them. And even though I wasn't a regular member, and even though I didn't even have nieces at that point in my life, I guess I've always had, you know, more normal human instincts than he did. But it just occurred to me, these kids have performed and they want to be told, you know, how great they were. So I was going to go up and say, wow, I'm so impressed. And they were adorable. Of course they were not, you know, the National Choral Society. But they were great kids. And I said to my dad, aren't you coming? And he looked at me and said, I'm just not good with children. I prefer not to. And I stared at him and I wanted to say, you had 2 daughters. How can you not be good with children? And then I realized, okay, you had 2 daughters and you weren't good with children. But that's okay. And oddly, I am a lot like him. I mean, some of his funny little quirks I have too. We eat the strangest food. He did not like to do dishes, and my mother was not, you know, the kind of woman who wanted to clean up after other people. So for breakfast, he wanted cereal and poached eggs. And he would cook a particular hot cereal called Wheatina. And what he would do in order to not have an egg pan and a cereal pan is he would then poach the eggs down in the cereal. So he'd only have 1 pan. And I am notorious for making these 1-pan concoctions just because I don't feel like, you know, cleaning up a big mess either. He loved to read. He read science fiction. He read mysteries, just like me. He really did not like stress and tension. I don't like stress and tension. I mean, my friend Germaine, my, what I call my, you know, adopted son, is willing to do really high pressure, go get 'em type of jobs. He makes double what I make. And I would rather not have the kind of pressure and the 18-hour work days that he has. So in that sense, I'm like my father. Really, I have 2 sections of me. I have the child section of me that is still kind of resentful because I didn't have a dad. Then I have the adult section of me who met this really funny, quirky, off-the-wall, you know, he did needlepoint, he did crocheting, he made jewelry, he did woodwork. He did whatever hobby or craft crossed his mind. He was a funny, likable guy. And, you know, we just kind of looked at each other, and I said, you know, you suck as a husband, even more than you suck as a father. And, you know, he kind of had the same wattle that I do, and he would just kind of sink down and really look like a wise old turtle. And, you know, just kind of turn his head. I'm like, okay, well, nothing's going to come of that. So I have the 2 phases. And since he passed away, and there is no chance that there will ever be a stepping up on his part and a becoming of a dad like dad, I have really worked to just let go of that and embrace the strange, quirky, funny man that is a lot like me, who I will never view as a dad, but I will view as a really close relative, who I actually did love, who simply was incapable of being a husband and a parent. So when you talk about what you want to let go and what you don't want to let go, I don't know. I mean, I was able to let go of, for the most part, and put aside the fact that I didn't have a dad and meet this person head-on when I was an adult as another adult. And I'm very happy that I had that. So I had no, this is so weird, I had no dad, but I had this great guy named Jim who I really loved, who was a relative, like a brother. And I hope that you can find something, people say lower your expectations, and I sometimes say lower your expectations because if I kept harping on the fact that I need a dad, I want a dad, I would never have had Jim. And so it's not really that you can't hope for the best or wish for the best. What I mean when I say that to people is look at the situation as it really is, no matter how painful, and see what you can realistically take from it and accept it. You can always hope for more, pray for more, and even try and do things to make more. But you have to carry with you that knowledge in the back of your mind that it is what it is and it may never change. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful to somebody. My story of my dad and Jim. So anyway, if you didn't want to put up with all this rambling, I understand. So anyhow, have a great evening, and thank you so much for volunteering to do readings for people. And bye.